If you work this evening, it's because of a decision that you made before lunch. And one change to your morning would have given you a choice. And that change is how I went from working most evenings to closing the laptop at 6 p.m. In this video, I'll show you the 3 steps so that you can do this and protect your evenings for good. So do you recognize this situation? It's 9 o'clock at night, you're working on your laptop, you had meetings running till about 6 o'clock that evening, and you're working because the work that actually needs you to think properly is still there, needing to be done. So you've got to do it now. You're tired, but you've got no choice. And you already know the advice for fixing this, which is do your most important task first thing. Win the morning, win the day. You've heard it 100 times. And the reason people give for why this works is always the same, but I don't think it's the whole story. The reason that you probably heard is all about willpower and energy. Your brain is fresh, your inbox hasn't worn you down yet, and so you can tackle that hard thing while you're at your best. And that's all true, but I think it misses the much bigger reason for working in that way. And that bigger reason only becomes evident in your evening. Think about how your day normally runs. If you've managed to do your most important work early on, then once the meetings are finished for the day, you do actually have a choice. You can close the laptop, see your family, do something for yourself, or you can choose to carry on working if you want to. The point is, it then becomes a choice because your most important work is already done. But if you haven't done that work yet, you've got no choice. You've had meetings all day, and the important thing that needed to be done is still there, waiting to be done, so you've got to do it that evening. The decision's got made for you. So you've really got 2 options for your day. One version of your day ends with you choosing whether to work in the evening, and the other ends with you having no choice but to. And I really want you to have a choice. I've worked with hundreds of senior leaders, and this trap of having no choice but to work in the evening is incredibly common, and most people wish they didn't have to. And I lived it myself for years. Most evenings, most weekends, and this is what actually pulled me out. And it comes down to 3 simple steps. And I know you will be able to do this. So let's start with the first step. The first step is working out what your most important work actually is. I remember a Thursday evening a few years ago when I was a partner at KPMG, and I was sitting at my desk in the office with a deck in front of me, and it was due to go to the CFO of a major client that day. And I was the one signing it off. And that work carried real risk, both to the firm and to me. So I was reviewing this deck in detail, page by page. And I was tired, and it was probably taking me longer than it should have done. And in one of the many instances of distraction whilst I was trying to review this deck, I looked at my calendar for the day and wondered why I just hadn't reviewed it earlier in the day. The things that I had spent my time on were nowhere near as important as this. And then the really obvious thing hit me. This was actually the most important thing of my week. And I was doing it at the worst possible time because I'd let everything else in my diary take priority. For years, I hadn't optimized my diary around my most important work. Making decisions that carried real risk and value, those sorts of things kept getting pushed to the evenings or the weekends because there was no other space for it. And that's the pattern for most senior people. The work that needs your sharpest attention is the work that needs your brain to be at its best. And for most of us, that's not at the end of a long day. So before you can protect your evenings, you have to decide what your most important work is. And for me, it was reviewing work that the team had produced. If you think back over your last few days and ask one question, what did I do that genuinely needed my expertise and my experience and not just my availability? That answer is your most important work. And that's what you're going to move. Now, deciding what your most important work is the easy part. Getting an actual hour or 2 to do it is where it falls apart for most people, because that time is the time that the rest of the world wants from you. So the second step is to make yourself strategically unavailable. Once I knew what my most important work was, I started blocking time for it, 60 to 90 minutes, first thing before anything else. And first thing doesn't have to mean very early. Often for me, that was 9 a.m. And I treated that time as a proper meeting with a very important client. It just happened that the client was myself, and that went in the calendar as a recurring appointment marked as busy. But setting up these time blocks in your calendar is one thing, defending them is another, because the morning is exactly when everyone else wants you. Emails start the second you open your laptop. People put in meetings really early in the morning because that was the only time that they could get you. Teams messages start firing, and being responsive to all of that feels like the right thing to do because that's just how our working days have evolved. particularly over the last few years. But every morning email you answer, instead of doing your most important work, is a trade. You're handing over your sharpest hour or two for giving a slightly faster reply on something that could have waited. And on the other end of that trade, you've given up the choice that could have been waiting for you at 6 p.m. as to whether to work that evening. So make the trade go the other way. Tonight, decide the one piece of your most important work that you're going to do tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow, when you start work, don't open your inbox, don't open Teams, don't just quickly check, go straight to that one task. Now, I know many of you won't be able to actually start this from tomorrow as your diaries are packed. But if you go forward a few days or weeks, you can then start to put these recurring blocks for your most important work in your diary. I call this being strategically unavailable, because you're deliberately cutting yourself off from your team so that you can get your most important work done. Now, if you do that, you will get your first evening back pretty quickly. But one evening back is just the start. The real payoff is what that protected evening does to the following day. Quick one, if this is starting to shift how you think about your working day, you'll love my weekly newsletter, which is for senior professionals who are working smarter than their peers. Every issue is about 3 minutes to read, and the link is in the description. Now, on to the final step. The third and final step is understanding the loop that happens when you put this in place. When you're doing your most important work during the normal working day, you get this brilliant compounding effect. You finish at 6 p.m. with the important thing handled, so you can actually switch off. You're not half thinking about an unfinished task over dinner. You sleep better, you wake up with more energy, which makes you sharper at your next most important work time block that morning, which then, in turn, protects the following evening. And once it's turning, it does a lot of the work for you. The trouble is, it can turn just as easily the other way. If you skip the block of work in the morning, effectively drag that task into the evening, you then never properly switch off, you'll probably sleep worse, wake up tired, and then the tired version of you that morning is more likely to skip the most important work time block again. That's the loop in reverse, and it's the one that a lot of senior people are stuck in, month after month, without ever realizing that's what's actually happening. So the goal here is to get that loop turning in the right direction for you and keep it there. So if you try this for a week, one protected block each morning, then notice how your evenings feel and how Friday morning feels compared to Monday morning. You'll finish most of your working days feeling happier and more fulfilled about what you've actually got done, and it will feel like a great week. Now, you might be thinking a few things. First, if I'm not available in the morning, won't people think I've checked out? But it's actually the opposite. When your hardest work is done by midday, you're then actually more available for the rest of the day, and you're less distracted because the hard thing is already done. So you can show up better for other people. Secondly, you may be thinking, what if something genuinely urgent comes up? And sometimes it obviously will. So the block of work is a default. A real emergency obviously still wins, but just be honest about whether something is a genuine emergency or not. Does this thing deserve to disrupt what you had planned to do? There's just one aside here, and I'd suggest here that if something is an emergency because someone else didn't plan something properly and it's not your responsibility, let it fail. They'll probably plan better next time. Third thing you might be thinking is, you don't have total control over what is in your calendar. And I get it, none of us do. But the mindset to have here is to start with your intention for how you'd like your day to pan out, knowing that you're not going to get it to work every day. You might get it to work maybe just 1 or 2 days a week, but that's significantly better than 0 days a week that most people have it working for themselves at the moment. So remember, whether you have a choice to work in the evening is decided by what you do before lunchtime. So make sure you're the one deciding it. I know how powerful this will be for you, and I'd love to hear how you get on in the comments. Now, when you get this to work, people will start noticing you differently because you'll be getting your most important work done more quickly and also to a high level of quality because you're giving it your brain's best attention. So you're going to want to capitalize on that. So watch this video next to find out the 5 rules top executives use to get paid more. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you there.